This is Bishop Weisenburger once again, and I'm delighted to be able to welcome to our diocese Father Paul Turner. Father Turner is a very well-known and respected liturgical theologian. He's priest of the Diocese of Kansas City, St. Joe. That's the diocese where I went to seminary college at Conception, Missouri.
Yeah, I'm a grad too.
Oh, are you really? Okay,
Yeah.
Very good. We're going to celebrate my 40th anniversary this summer.
Congratulations.
But Father Turner is here today in order to give some teachings and some workshops for our priests about Eucharist. And so we're very excited to have him here. Now, in the Second Vatican Council, one of the most frequently quoted statements is that the Eucharist is the source and summit of our existence, our Catholic life. Source and summit. It's the summit because celebrating the Eucharist is the peak of our spiritual life, but it also returns us constantly to the source of living our Christian faith in the world. With that in kind of the background, Father Turner, our nation is looking at a Eucharistic renewal, they're referring to it as, and we've even done some celebrations here in our diocese related to the Eucharistic renewal. But tell us just a little bit in your own words, your thoughts about Eucharistic renewal and where the church is going.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. It's an important time for our country and for the individual dioceses as we go along. But every Catholic knows that the Mass is the heart of what we do. And for years I've been saying the single most important thing Catholics can do is participate at the Mass. Now we learned during the pandemic years it was important to love your neighbor and stay away from Mass for a time so that we could preserve health and take care of one another.
Right.
But now we are returning. We're all seeing the value of having this as the center of our lives. Many people have been watching Mass on live stream, but some have discovered, no, I'm missing something by doing that. Most obviously, the actual reception of the Eucharist, the sacrament of the Eucharist, but even the participation in the celebration is something that is extremely important for us. We set time aside, we set a place aside to make this a priority. And I think most people who do this, who make the Eucharist a weekly priority, find that it does have an impact on their lives. It changes how they think, how they set about their week, how they enter into their week. They know that they're always going to be returning to this source from which they will derive their grace to go forward, but they'll also have a peak experience of their encounter with Christ as they come together to celebrate the Eucharist.
Oh, wonderful, Father Paul. Now, I would also say I had a professor when I studied theology, a liturgical theologian, and he would point out to us that both in the Old Testament for the Israelites, the faithful Jewish people, but also continuing on in Christ, God never calls us into a private relationship. He calls us into a personal relationship with Him, but never a private relationship. And that communal aspect of the liturgy I find is so important. In fact, I sometimes worry, I'm not here to grind any axes today at all, but I sometimes worry when people say, well, I'll go here for Mass today and they're somewhere else and they're somewhere else. It's almost like it's just me clicking into the Mass the same way I might click into a website.
Right.
But when you're bonded to a parish, the people of God, which is what Jesus always called people into community, I just find that communal aspect is so important. I think we learned that in the pandemic. In fact, I keep reading statistics that across the nation, we've lost some people practicing the faith, and yet quite a few of my pastors tell me numbers are up bigger than they've ever been.
Yeah,
I think people have missed that communal sense and are beginning to realize that it's not something extra to faith. It's a part of faith.
Exactly. Yeah, there is a social dimension to our faith that has to be expressed. One of the themes from the council that I think fits with what you're saying is this idea of a priestly people. It's based on a line from the first letter of Peter, which in turn is based on the Old Testament concept that God chose a nation, a royal nation, a priestly people to be his own. And as Christians, we interpret that to mean that we all have priestly responsibilities at Mass. So we are offering prayers, we are offering sacrifice for the sake of others. And your point that being faithful to one parish is spot on for developing good Catholic spirituality. You sound like a pastor, because all of us want to have people who are regulars to our community. We make an effort to get to know the people who come, to know their names, connect them with one another. This is what builds the community that then is able to better celebrate the Eucharist with greater authenticity. So a good Eucharistic revival will be stirring up that kind of commitment, a commitment of service, a commitment of community, and a commitment of prayer. That's going to really, really bring the Eucharist alive.
Yes. Well, now, you're here today, as I said in our little introduction, to give some workshops for our priests. Just in a nutshell, what do you plan on presenting to the priests?
Yeah, I'm going to speak this afternoon on Concelebration and tomorrow morning on Eucharistic Adoration. And let me explain why I chose those two, or proposed those two topics, which you then approved for me. When you first became bishop here, I was coming in to do a session. I think this was 2017. Does that sound right?
Yes.
And I presented some things for the priests on the lectionary and on the liturgy of the Eucharist. So I thought maybe we should step outside that territory a little bit and look at some other things. Concelebration is something that priests do quite frequently, and in fact, we'll do it right after I give this presentation today. But I find that not all of us have looked at the rubrics of Concelebration. I didn't until I wrote my book on Ars Celebrandi. And once I discovered some things about the history of this and what it is we're trying to achieve as a body, I learned a lot, and I find priests who hear this presentation get more energized around the concept of Concelebration. And then tomorrow we'll look at Eucharistic Adoration. One reason I proposed this topic is I think throughout the United States, many people see the Eucharistic revival as an adoration revival, that this is a time to spend more time in private prayer before the Blessed Sacrament, which is valuable and a part of Catholic spirituality. I will make that point with the priest tomorrow morning. At the same time, the Mass is the heart, and even Eucharistic adoration flows from the Mass and directs you back to the Mass. So we'll be, because so many people are interested in that right now, I thought it might be worthwhile for the priests to see the rubrics of Eucharistic adoration, what the Church says and does not say about how this takes place. There are some practices going on that might be a little bit outside what the Catholic Church has in mind, but I think an authentic Eucharistic spirituality is going to get people into their time of adoration, but commit them even more to this priestly people's participation in the sacrifice of the Mass.
Oh, Father Turner, that's wonderful. We are so glad to have you here. And I know that my brother priests here are all delighted as well.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, an honor to be in the diocese. I've been here a few times before, have always received a warm welcome, and I don't just mean the weather.
And promise us this won't be your last.
Oh, I'd love to come back. Thank you so much.
Father, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.